the Lost World. Long before pharaohs and Roman legions, an ancient civilization existed on the other side of the earth, where the skyscrapers of Sydney now shine. About 50,000 years ago, the first people arrived on the southern continent of Australia, the world's earliest known seafarers. Geologists believe that at that time, the islands of New Guinea in the north and Tasmania in the south were part of the continent. A few thousand years later, the continent became more densely populated. The earliest archaeological remains of humans in Australia belong to the so-called Mungo Man, who lived around 40,000 years ago. Based on his remains, scientists concluded that the first Australians were tall and robust. During the prehistoric period, Australia was settled in several waves. Around 5,000 years ago, with one of the migration waves, the dingo dog appeared on the continent, the only non-marsupial predator in Australia. Only by the second millennium BCE did Australian Aboriginals acquire their modern appearance, evolving and intermixing with new settlers. The Aboriginal people formed diverse tribes with their own languages, cultures, religions, and traditions. By the time Europeans arrived, around 500 tribes lived on the continent, speaking approximately 250 different languages. None of them had a writing system, so their history is poorly known. They used symbolic drawings to pass down ancient legends. These myths and archaeological finds are the only sources available to historians studying Australia's ancient past. Because humans began settling Australia so long ago, for comparison, humans arrived in the Americas only 13,000 years ago, 27,000 years later. And due to the continent's isolation from the rest of the world, Aboriginal civilization is considered one of the oldest continuous cultures in the world. Officially, Australia was discovered by Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon in 1606. He reached the Gulf of Carpentaria in the north and landed on Cape York, the continent's northernmost point, just 160 kilometers from New Guinea. A year earlier, Spanish sailor Luis Vaz de Torres had sailed these waters and may have seen land on the horizon, mistaking it for another archipelago. There are several alternative theories of Australia's discovery. One suggests Portuguese sailors discovered the continent before Janszoon. A fleet led by de Sequeira explored routes to the Moluccas and sent expeditions around the archipelago. One such expedition, commanded by Mendonca in 1522, may have reached Australia's northwestern coast. This theory seems plausible. Cannons from the 16th century were found on the western coast in the 20th century. Unusual artifacts have occasionally been discovered that support the idea of early European visits, but these theories remain disputed. In any case, these discoveries remained unknown in Europe until the Dutch expeditions. Janszoon claimed the discovered lands for the Netherlands, though the Dutch never settled them. Over the next decades, the Dutch continued exploring Australia. Dirk Hartog visited the west coast in 1616, and Frederick de Houtman followed. In 1619, in 1644, Abel Tasman began his famous voyages, discovering New Zealand, Tasmania, Fiji, and Tonga, and proving Australia was a separate continent. The Dutch explored only the west coast. The rest of the coastline and interior remained unknown until James Cook's voyage in 1769. At the time, it was thought that New Holland, the Dutch name for Australia, was unrelated to the mythical southern continent. Terra Australis Incognita. New Holland was seen as unwelcoming, harsh climate. Hostile natives, so interest in it was limited. In the mid-18th century, the British considered sending convicts to islands in the Southern Ocean or to a possible southern continent. In 1769, British Lieutenant James Cook sailed the Endeavour to Tahiti, with secret orders to find and chart New Holland's eastern coast. Cook landed at Botany Bay and found the land suitable for settlement. Sailing north, he discovered the strait between Australia and New Guinea, proving they were separate. Though he didn't find Terra Australis, he disproved its existence. In 1814, English navigator Matthew Flinders proposed renaming New Holland to Australia, though not immediately accepted. The name became official in 1824. Cook recommended Botany Bay for settlement. In 1787, the first fleet of settlers departed, mostly convicts. Many were not hardened criminals, but minor offenders, traders, and farmers. Most were soon pardoned and given farmland. They were joined by soldiers, officers, and civil servants. The fleet found a more suitable site nearby Port Jackson. A settlement was founded at Sydney Cove. The colony, New South Wales, was officially proclaimed on January 26, 1788, a date now celebrated as Australia Day. The city of Sydney was named after British Home Secretary Viscount Sydney. The first governor tried to maintain peace with the Aboriginal people, reform the convicts, and establish agriculture and trade. The early years were hard: lack of food, poorly skilled convicts, and many sick new arrivals. But by 1791, the colony began to thrive. Convicts faced harsh conditions building infrastructure, working on farms, and enduring punishments. Pardoned convicts could receive land and even hire other convicts. One former convict grew the colony's first successful wheat crop in 1789. In 1793, the first free settlers, not counting soldiers, arrived. They were granted land, tools, and the right to employ convict labor. With the colony established, inland exploration continued. Using Aboriginal guides, many expeditions succeeded. In 1813, Blaxland, Lawson, and Wentworth crossed the Blue Mountains and found vast grazing lands. In 1824, Hugh Manhovell discovered the Murray River and its tributaries. In 1828, Charles Sturt traced the Darling River and reached its junction with the Murray. Explorers often retained Aboriginal place names. In 1839, Polish explorer Strzelecki climbed Australia's highest peak, Mount Kosciuszko. In 1829, Britain claimed all of Western Australia. New South Wales was later divided into several colonies: Victoria, South Australia, Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Swan River. New cities like Melbourne and Brisbane were founded. Aboriginal people were pushed inland, decimated by disease, and forcibly moved into reserves by the mid-19th century. By 1868, transportation of convicts to Australia had ended. In the 1850s, a gold rush began. The government required mining licenses, angering miners. In 1854, diggers in Ballarat revolted, known as the Eureka Rebellion. They formed the Ballarat Reform League, demanding universal suffrage, license abolition, and removal of property qualifications for Parliament. The rebellion was crushed, but the courts acquitted the miners. Their demands were eventually met, licenses were abolished, and they gained political rights. The rebellion boosted liberalism in Australia. In 1855, New South Wales gained self-government while remaining a British colony. Other colonies followed. Local governments managed internal affairs, while Britain handled defense and foreign policy. The gold rush spurred economic growth. The following decades were prosperous, but by the 1890s, the economy slowed, labor movements rose, new political parties formed, and the colonies considered uniting. Over a decade, the colonies debated and planned unification. In 1901, they formed the Commonwealth of Australia, federated Dominion of the British Empire. Initially, Melbourne was the capital, but in 1911, construction began on a purpose-built city, Canberra. It became the capital in 1927. Several territories under British control, Norfolk Island, Ashmore, and Cartier Islands, later joined the Commonwealth. New Zealand was expected to join but chose its own path to independence. Australia's economy relied heavily on exports, especially grain and wool. The 1929 Great Depression severely impacted the country, pushing unemployment to 29%. In 1931, Britain passed the Statute of Westminster, granting Dominions full independence. Australia ratified it only in 1942, gaining legal independence. World War II boosted Australia's economy. The US promised protection from Japan, so Australia joined the war with less risk. After the war, many Europeans sought a new life in Australia. The government encouraged immigration to grow the population and attract skilled workers. By 1975, 2 million immigrants had arrived, mostly from the UK and Ireland. As a result, most Australians speak English, which evolved into a unique Australian dialect. The country has no official language. In the 1970s, major reforms were enacted. free higher education, abolition of compulsory military service, land rights recognition for Aboriginal people. From a penal colony, Australia became a highly developed nation with one of the world's highest immigration rates. In 1986, the Australia Act ended all British legal authority. Australia became a fully independent state. Today, Australia is a strong parliamentary democracy, blending British heritage with unique Australian identity. It is a member of the G20, a key US ally, and an active force in the Asia-Pacific region. Yet, Australia remains a constitutional monarchy. Its head of state is still the British monarch, currently King Charles III. Each time the Republic debate resurfaces, it sparks heated national discussion. Australia faces many challenges: recognition of Indigenous rights, climate change, balancing geopolitics between the US and China, a possible final move to becoming a republic. But one thing is certain: Australia is a nation that never stands still. From penal colony to global power, its story is far from over. It's just beginning. Subscribe if you're inspired by the destinies of nations, and leave a comment. Could Australia become a superpower?